Okay. Now, often, okay, let's go over this first. The deposit escrow is actually a service. Okay. It is a place where buyer and seller can find a safe place. Okay. Let's say we call it a safe place, and it's an impartial agent for the buyer and the seller to deposit funds and their documents. Okay, so we hold those documents and we hold the buyer's funds until buyer and seller are ready to do the exchange and ready to close the escrow. So that's what basically escrow is about. We can go to the next slide, Michael. Okay. Now, why do we need escrow? Okay. Normally, in a real estate transaction, buyer and seller do not know each other, right? So therefore, there's a lack of trust. So they want an independent third party to help them with the transaction. Okay. There is also a need for a binding contract. Whatever we write up in escrow, like escrow instructions, which after they are signed by buyer and seller, they become a binding contract between the parties. Okay, and then there is also the need for title insurance. Okay, now title insurance, they will not sell title insurance if you don't have an escrow. The title companies do not deal with the parties directly. You have to have an escrow. So then that's the only way they provide title insurance. Okay. Escrow often will also serve as a clearinghouse for the payment of liens. So in escrow, we also clear all the liens for the parties before we close. Okay. There is also the need to provide a full accounting. When we close escrow, we provide a closing statement, okay, for the parties. So buyer gets a closing statement and the seller gets a closing statement. And on the closing statement, we provide a full accounting of where all the funds went. Who do we pay? How much we pay? It's all on there, okay? And when it comes to filing taxes, the accountants need to see the closing statement. Okay, so that's what we provide at the final when we close escrow. We can go to the next slide, please.
Sure.
Okay. Now let's talk about the characteristics of escrow. Okay. First, we have confidentiality. Escrow, we always keep everything confidential. We do not disclose to any outsiders anything about the transaction. If somebody tries to call us and find out information, we do not talk to them unless they are our principal parties, which will be the buyer, the seller, or the agents involved. Otherwise, we keep everything confidential. Okay. We are also impartial. Okay. We are not on anybody's side. We are not on the buyer's side and not on the seller's side. We just want to do our job and help, follow the instructions that the buyer and seller provide to us. Okay. Some people think we are referees, but we are not. We don't go into disputes and stuff like that. So just keep in mind. And we do not provide legal advice or tax advice. Okay. We urge the parties to seek attorneys or talk to a CPA if they need advice in those areas. We serve as a limited agency relationship, okay, which means that our relationship with the parties is only limited to everything that is in the contract, in the escrow instructions as our duties. And the duration ends when the escrow ends, okay, so that's why we are called limited agents, okay. We can go to the next slide, please. Okay. Now we have different types of escrows. Okay. For escrows, we can do sale or purchase of real property. Okay. We can do sale or purchase of business, like restaurants, laundry, laundromats. car wash business, gas stations. We can do all that. We also do sale and purchase of personal property, like if somebody has a yacht, a boat, a diamond, not all escrow companies will do that kind of personal property exchange, but there are some that will do, okay? We do a lot of refinance, and or when the parties want to just take out a new loan, we do escrows for that service too. A lot of people don't know. They only think we only do escrows when it comes to sell and purchase. But when they refinance the transaction, we can also do those escrows for the lender and the borrower. Okay? And when the parties need to transfer an ABC liquor license, that's the ABC stands for Alcoholic Beverage Control. It's a department that regulates all the wine and liquor license, for the restaurants and for bars like that. When the parties need to sell that license, the ABC requires them to have an escrow. So we do that service as well. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so there are different escrow entities. Okay, so in California, actually, the escrow companies are basically can be categorized by either they are licensed or they are controlled. Okay, licensed companies are the independent escrow companies like our company. Okay, we are licensed by the Department of Business Oversight. Okay, and the Department of Business Oversight regulates our procedures, how we, our practices. So they have a lot of requirements for us. All of our employees needs to go through background check. They need to be bonded. We need to be a part of a member of the Escrow Fidelity Corporation, which insures the consumer's funds up to like $5 million. Okay, yeah. Now, unlike other types of escrows, if they are not independent escrows, they are called controlled, companies. They are non-licensed, or they are in-house divisions owned by like real estate brokers, mortgage brokers, banks, or title insurance companies. And they do not have the same requirements like ours. Independent escrows, we are subject to audits all the time. Okay, at least once a year, But control companies, they're not. Their requirements are way different. So as far as consumer is concerned, the safest place for them is the independent escrow companies. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, now I'm going to go over a few of the items that when you have an escrow open, what we look for, okay? Those items that we need to pay attention to. As soon as you open an escrow, the escrow instructions get sent out in a package, to the parties. In there will be a form called Statement of Information, okay? And the Statement of Information is actually a form that buyer and the seller needs to complete and return that to escrow right away. When we receive that form, we send it to the title company immediately. So then the title company can check, okay, to see if the buyer or the seller has any liens or any judgments against them. Okay. In the Statement of Information, they will ask a lot of questions like Social Security number, birthday, and also where they live for the last 10 years, where they have worked for the last 10 years. Very much mostly the private information. Now, it is very safe for the parties to provide that, A lot of times buyers and sellers, they're reluctant, okay? They are like, do I really need to fill out all that information? And the answer is yes, because it is necessary for the title company. They do want that information so that when they run the general index, and if they happen to come across another person with the same name, okay, same first name, same last name, but the other person has a lot of liens and judgments, so then they will look at this form and see, oh, does the social security number match? Does the birthday match? And this person's occupation could not have maybe, have this lien, right? So that's why it is very important that the statement of information gets completed and returned to us ASAP, okay? The other form is the preliminary change of ownership form. Every time we record a grant deed, okay, the grant deed is the deed that we use to transfer the title, right? The grant deed gets recorded when we close escrow. It needs to be accompanied by a preliminary change of ownership, okay? That form gives the county assessor information of what the transfer is about, okay? It will tell them if this is a sale, or if it's a gift, if people just transfer, as a gift, right? So basically, they want to know how they're going to do the reassessment, okay? So on this form, it will have like the purchase price and all that. It is necessary to accompany the recording docs, because if that form is not available with the grant deed for recording, right away the county will charge a penalty, okay? The penalty on the spot is $20. So they still let you record if you don't have that form, but they charge a penalty, right? But after that, a few months later, they will send the buyer, the new owner, right, a letter and say, oh, we didn't get this form, so you need to complete it for us. And once that notice gets out, if the homeowner continues to ignore them, they will penalize them a lot of money. It could be hundreds of dollars or thousands, depending on how far, down the road that they don't take care of that immediately. Okay? So if you represent the buyer, make sure you get that, you see that, make sure you let them know to return that to escrow right away. Okay? If you're selling a condo, there is homeowners association involved, right? So when we open the escrow, one of the requirements for the contract is that buyer should get all the HOA documents, okay? The HOA documents contain things like CC&Rs, bylaws, and then they will also have things like the financial documents, the income statements and the expenses, the balance sheet for the association, and it also contains things like regulations and rules. So the buyer can check all those documents, read them and see if they like the association. Okay, those are the homeowners association documents are very important. Sometimes the buyers, whether they decide to move forward or not, they will base their decision on what they see. Okay, and especially they want to know if the association has enough money or not, right? If they are running at a loss, they may not want to buy this condo. Okay, if they see like the road, the driveways, it's already need work, they look at the bank account or reserves, there's no reserves, then they may not want to purchase, because after they purchase, guess what? They may have special assessments right away. They have to take money out of their pocket to pay for things, maintenance that needs to be done immediately. Okay? Now, before we can get the homeowners association, many times the management company for the association requires upfront fee. Okay, they require upfront fee, and sometimes these HOA management companies, their fees could be very expensive. It's anywhere between like $150 to up to like $500 or maybe even $800 I have seen, depending on how many associations are involved as well. Sometimes those associations down in Irvine, many times they have 2 associations. Okay, so 2 associations, so they may require 2 upfront fees. Okay, so if you represent the seller and you list it, it's a condo that you're selling, make sure you let them know that there's a possibility of upfront fees. You want to get them prepared. Okay, and then you always want to check if the city where the property is in requires any city inspection. Okay, some cities require city inspection or at least go through a property report. So the homeowner, the seller, needs to go into the city and sign an application for them, make an appointment for them to come out. Places like Almonte, the city of Almonte, requires inspection. Okay, Pasadena requires inspection. San Marino requires inspection. Before, Monterey Park requires inspection, but they no longer do that. Monterey Park, they stopped the inspection since last year. Okay, so you need to check every time you have a deal in a specific city. If you are representing the seller, you want to check ahead of time. Very easy. You just call up the city. Okay, ask for their planning division or the department of building and safety or whatever. You can just explain to them that I'm selling a property in your city. Let me know if there is any inspection required or any property report that is required before we can close escrow. And they will tell you. They will tell you. So if you represent the seller, you know that ahead of time. You would be able to prepare the seller to go through that. There could also be fees, so they may want to know that they have to pay for that fee, right? And if you represent buyer, you also want to make sure you check too, because what if the listing agent did not know about it, the seller did not know about it, or escrow did not know about it and did not tell you. So you may not get that until after you close, then it's kind of late. I've seen transactions, agents call me after and say, hey, I just closed a property in the city of Monte. No one did the inspection. I'm like, what happened? So those things need to be checked, because some cities, they actually fine the parties if it's not done. Okay, they penalize them. Okay. The other thing we escrow look for right away is the vesting. Okay. If you represent buyer, you need to talk to them about deciding on how they want to hold title. Okay. If they are just by themselves, one person, it's very easy. Just single man, single woman, or if they, depending on, if they married before and they're divorced now, then it should be unmarried woman or unmarried man. Okay? Now, if they are just one person, but they are married, then you need to ask them, how about the spouse? How about the husband or the wife? Will he or she be on title? Okay? Because that's going to lead us to the next item, which is the quitclaim. If they are not going to be on title, you need to ask them, are they going to sign a quitclaim? Okay, we need to know these things early because sometimes the husband or the wife may not be available. Sometimes they're not here, or sometimes they have planned to leave the country right away and they didn't tell you. And when it comes to closing, we don't have that quitclaim, we cannot close. Okay, and then going back to vesting a little bit, if they have more than one person, if it's husband and wife, they have 3 choices. Does anyone know the choices for husband and wife, by the way? Okay, let me just briefly go over, okay? For husband and wife, they have 3 choices. The first one is joint tenants. The second one is community property. And the third one is community property with right of survivorship. Okay? If you have time, look up these. And then, so then you get familiar with what they are. So then you can, if the buyer asks you, you can kind of explain to them. Okay? But remember, please, do not advise them. Do not tell them what is the best way for them to hold title, because that means you're giving legal advice. Okay? So many times, like when I open an escrow, I sometimes, I ask the agent, do you know how your buyer wants to hold title? Okay? And right away, they tell me, oh, as joint tenants, or as, community property. Then I always ask them again, like, is this how they wish to hold title? Because otherwise we can wait a little bit. In escrow, we have the form for them to take a look and decide for themselves. As the agent, I don't want you to advise them, okay? Because law, and that's what we're not here to do, okay?
Explain to them rather than advise them.
That's right. You can explain to them, let them know the decision is theirs, right? Yeah. Okay. And then we can go to the next slide. Okay. So a few things we call escrow red flags, okay, that I want to bring to your attention. The first one is the time period. Is it realistic to complete your transaction? Sometimes I get contracts that says we're going to close in 7 days. Okay? You need to find out exactly, are we going to be able to close in 7 days? Okay? Escrow, sometimes I've had closings in 3 days before. Okay? 3 days is very, 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 very quickly. But for that 3-day transaction, we did a lot of work before we open escrow. Okay? Like we have ordered the title report already. We have already ordered a lot of different kinds of reports like NHD, everything. And we already know what the title report looks like. If there's any liens, any loans that we need to deal with. And we have, if there is anything on there, we need to get all the information ahead of time. And then once buyer and seller signs everything, buyer's money comes in, we can quickly close that right away. Okay? But make sure it's realistic. Especially right now, I don't know if you have heard about it. Starting October 3rd, the TRID, right? So the closing statement is actually going to change. Okay? If any of you have bought a property or sold a property before, you have a closing statement and it looks a certain way, right? Now, starting October 3rd, it's going to change. It's going to be different. And what everyone is thinking is that once the new law kicks in, the time to close the escrow, and this is when they have a loan. If the buyer needs to get a loan, it will take longer than 30 days. Okay, everyone is guessing we'll probably need to, extend up to like 35 to about 40 days, maybe like 38 days, more realistic. Okay, so make sure you allow enough time. Okay, the other thing is power of attorney. When you have your transactions, make sure you talk to the buyer and the seller, ask them during the course of the escrow, is any one of them going to travel? Okay, if anyone's planning to go out of town, out of the country, you need to make sure that the power of attorney is done so that if anything needs to be signed, someone can sign for that. Okay, And sometimes clients tell you that I already have an existing power of attorney. If they do, ask them for a copy, and then also ask them where is the original too, okay? Now, you get a copy, give it to escrow so we can take a look at it. Make sure that the power of attorney, the format, and the way it was executed, and the date, everything is acceptable, okay? If a power of attorney is too old, it is not acceptable. If the power of attorney, the verbiage on there does not have the proper wordings, it is not acceptable for the transaction, okay? And then we also check how it was signed and notarized. Sometimes there are problems in that area as well, okay? Now, deposit. Okay, another item that is really important is the deposit. And from the deposit, we refer to from the beginning of the transaction, like the earnest money deposit, the buyer's EMD, when they write the check. We need to make sure you take a look at it and see whose account is that. Is it the buyer's account? Okay, many buyers, especially those who own business, they may take out the business account and write a check. Okay, it may be okay. It may, it may be okay or it may not be okay, depending on if they need financing or not. If they need to borrow a loan, the lender may not accept that. So if that's the case, you give it to us, we deposit, and then when they do the loan, the lender says, no, we cannot use this money. They need to be returned. That is, that can create a problem because any time when we return any funds from escrow, we need buyer and seller to sign. Okay? Sometimes the seller may not cooperate, then they cannot take the money back out. And sometimes the lenders, even returning the money, is not good enough. They need us to completely cancel the escrow and open a new one, so then they don't see the trace of this money. So it's very important when they hand you a check, take a look and see where it's coming from. If it's not their account, you know that they're getting a loan. Make sure you check with their loan agent to see if that's going to be acceptable, okay? And then, of course, another time that they need to make a deposit in escrow will be the closing funds when it's time to close, right? Sometimes buyers themselves, they don't know. They take money out from, any account that's convenient for them, and they just send it to us. On our end, we would not know either. Money coming, we just deposit, right? But then we need to send a receipt to the lender. And when the lender look at it and say, oh no, we cannot take funds from this account because it was not sourced. We have not checked to see where these funds were from. So that can also create a problem. And another thing I do want to mention about deposits, okay? Sometimes the deposit can come from a third party, okay? Sometimes when you get, let's say for example, we have a cash transaction, so we don't have lender involved, okay? So we're not going to have a lender that says, oh, the money cannot come from this person or whichever account, okay? So let's say the example is you're dealing with the father, and the father gives you a check, and maybe from the daughter's account or something. Okay, and the daughter is not a party to our transaction. The contract is written in the father's name, but it's the daughter that's writing the check. Okay, so that is a third-party deposit. Okay, that means it's a third-party deposit. What's important about that is in escrow, any money that comes in that is not our principal parties, like our buyer or seller, we need the third party to sign instruction for us, saying that this money depositing into our escrow account can be used for the principal party. Okay, they need to sign off. So, that's very important for them to know, because sometimes that person may not be available to sign a third-party instruction for us. Okay. Another thing I want to mention about sending funds in for closing, because the last few years there's just so much information about cashier's check, fraud, and stuff like that. Now, most escrow companies do not accept checks for closing, not even cashier's checks. Okay, so make sure you advise your client that when it comes to closing, that they know that it needs to be wired into escrow. Okay, we can go to the next one. Okay, corporate entity. Okay, when you're dealing with the parties who, on the contract, they have a corporation name or an LLC, we need to see their corporate documents. Okay, and I have a list for you in the handout that I provided. We'll go over that in details shortly. Okay, now we're going to go to about foreigners. Now, foreigners can purchase, can buy and sell real estate, right, in the U.S. Okay, when they buy, usually there's not much that they need to deal with. But when it comes to selling, because they are a foreigner, taxes need to be withheld from them. Okay, and the way the taxes are withheld is that the standard is 10% of the gross sales price. Okay, if they're selling it for $1 million, the withholding for the IRS, which is the federal level, is $100,000. Okay, yeah, and for the state is 3.33%. Okay, so that's 30-something thousand, right? So if you represent seller, make sure you ask them ahead of time if they are a U.S. citizen or if they are a legal resident. If they have green card, they are fine. No need to withhold. Okay, but if they are foreigner, we need to start talking to them about their funds will be held. It's actually a prepayment of taxes. Okay, now a couple of things I want to point out is that for the withholding, the IRS actually says that it is the buyer's job to withhold from the seller. Okay, it is not escrow's job. It is the buyer's responsibility to withhold from the seller. That's what the law says. So if you represent buyer, you need to make sure you get an affidavit signed by the seller saying that they are not a foreigner, or you need to see that escrow has helped your buyer withhold the funds from the seller. Okay, because otherwise your buyer will be responsible for it. The IRS will come after your buyer for that money, 10%. Okay, and now for the state level, even if they are a foreign, even if they are U.S. A citizen or legal resident, they may still need to be withheld. Okay, the reason is they don't just look at whether the person is a foreigner or not. They also need to know if the person, if the property itself actually is the person's, it's the seller's principal residence or not. Okay, if it's not the principal residence, and they're not selling at a loss, they're not doing a 1031 exchange, we still need to withhold for the state, the 3.33%. Okay? Okay, we can go to the next one. Okay, so I actually covered a little bit about that already, about the withholding. It's actually what we call FIRPTA. Okay? So when you come into escrow, you hear people talk about FIRPTA. That is about the withholding. Okay? As I mentioned before, make sure you get an affidavit from the seller, okay? As the agent representing the buyer or as the buyer, you have the right to ask, okay? You ask the listing agent for it or you ask escrow for it, okay? Escrow, like for our company, we do obtain the affidavit. If the affidavit comes back and it's not signed, we will question that. We will ask them, is it not signed because they are a foreigner? We get that confirmed, okay? Because if they are a foreigner, we do the withholding, okay? You need to, that item, you need to specifically find out from the escrow company, because I want to let you know that some escrow companies, they do not take on that responsibility, okay? And they will tell you in their escrow instructions very clearly. They specify and say, we do not take care of that item. So that means you cannot just automatically assume that they will do that for you, okay? Okay, and then we talk about who is the responsible person to withhold. It's the buyer, okay? But escrow can help. You just need to make sure that they will do that job, okay? We talk about that. Now, if they are a foreigner, you want to make sure that your client obtains an ITIN, which is an International Tax ID number, because without that, you're not going to be able to remit the payment, okay? When we, excuse me. When we do the withholding, we send the money into the IRS, we need to put an ITIN on there, okay? If we don't have it, I have still gotten requests to go ahead and send in anyway, okay? Some clients, they already told me they don't plan to get this money back at all. Their plan is they're going to sell the property and they'll just pay the 10%. They're not going to even apply for a refund or anything. So they don't care about having an ITIN or not. They said just send it in. Okay? At the request of the parties, we can do that. We will do that. We can send it in. However, I don't know what kind of problems they will have later because the money go in and there's no tax ID number with it, right? And what I heard is sometimes they put it in a suspense account, and locating that sometimes could be a little bit more procedure, before they can actually find it and apply for it, apply to the right person, Okay. All right. So let's see what else we have. Michael, next one, please. Okay. So today I also want to let you know that if you have a power of attorney, a client signing with a power of attorney, how the signature should really look, okay? And I did give you one in the handout that you have there. So when you have a person signing with power of attorney, the person should handwrite, okay? They should not print each letter because that is not acceptable. Okay, so let's say the husband is not here. The husband gave the wife the power of attorney. So Jane is the wife. Jane is signing for John. Okay, so Jane will write John first. She doesn't need to follow his signature because that's not the purpose. All she needs to do is just write out John Smith and then by Jane Doe. Jane can just do her regular signature, okay? And then you need to put those words. Ask his attorney in fact, okay? All in handwriting like that, okay? And when it comes to initialing, then they just do JS by JD as his, and then you can just put in big cap AIF. Okay, and that will be the proper way to execute the documents. Okay. All right. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay. Another thing that I want you to pay attention to when you have the parties sign your contract. Okay. If you are, doesn't matter if you are representing buyer or seller, you want to make sure you got the right person signing the contract. Okay? Because sometimes the title is refined. It says it's in a trust. Okay? But you need to know who signs on behalf of the trust. Okay? You should ask the client to give you their trust agreement, and any amendments, if they have any amendments, they should provide it to you. And they will need to also provide a certification of trust. Okay? But in the documents, what you will find is it will tell you exactly who should be the signers. Okay? Many people create a family trust, and while they are still alive, it is themselves who's going to sign, right? Because they created the trust. They are the current trustees of the trust. Okay? But sometimes, if you're dealing with a person whose property was left to them by their parents or something, then you need to look at the trust agreement, and it will tell you who will be the successor trustee, and that's who you want to make sure you got signing your contract. Okay? Now remember, your contract is not valid unless it is properly signed. Okay? If you don't have the right person signing it, if that person has no legal capacity to sign it, and they are not authorized signers, they cannot sign that contract. Okay? Let's go to the next slide. Corporations. Okay? If you're dealing with a corporation, you want to get from them the articles of incorporation and a copy of the statement of information, which is the form that they file with the state every year. That will tell you who are the executive officers of the corporation, like who's the CEO, the president, the secretary, the VP. So you want to make sure you got those right people signing your contract. And they will need to provide a corporate resolution for escrow and title to close. Okay? The typical signers of a corporation would be 2 executive officers. We can use a president and secretary or anybody else. And if they say they will give us 1 signature, then we need a corporate seal to be attached, to be affixed to the contract or to the document. Okay? Sometimes the corporation, there's only 1 person. Okay? 1 person takes care of everything. That person is the president, secretary, CFO, VP, everything. Right? So we just have 1 person sign and then write down 2 titles. You can just put president and secretary, and that will tell everybody there's only 1 person, but we got 2 capacity there. Okay. All right. We go to the next one. I believe we have LLC. For an LLC, these are the documents that will be required. Okay. Operating agreement, that will tell us who are the members of the LLC. And the articles of organization, that's like a birth certificate, right? When the corporation or an LLC is created and approved by the Secretary of State, they will give them an articles of incorporation for the corporation, or if it's an LLC, they will give them an articles of organization, which shows that the corporation or the LLC has been duly formed. Okay. Again, the statement of information will tell us who are the managers. Okay. For an LLC, the signers are the managers or the managing member. And this information, you will find it in the operating agreement. Okay. All right. And then we go to the next one. Okay. The limited partnership, you don't encounter it a lot. But for limited partnership, this is what you'll need. And the signer is usually the general partner. And then next, I think we have general partnership, same things, same items that you need. And the signers are all the general partners. Okay? And I think that's it. How are we doing on time? Are we okay? Yeah? Okay. Now, if you have any questions,
Question.
Sure.
I'm foreigner, but I'm studying for like international student. And then I have this company with C corporation for real estate investment. I have a house right now. It's already in escrow. Do I need to tell escrow that I'm an international student?
No, because it's the corporation that's selling, right? It's not really you that's selling, right? It is the corporation. And your corporation is a California corporation, right?
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, so the corporation itself is not a foreign corporation.
But when I bought the house is before I set up the company, so the title is my name.
Okay, but you have already transferred, right, to the corporation.
What do you mean? I didn't change the title.
Oh, you didn't change title, so it's still in your name then? Okay, if it's still in your name, then that issue will come up. Yeah, if you haven't changed to the corporation, then it is really yourself as an individual that is selling. So that issue will come up. That will be applied.
So it's a little bit more difficult? Or?
No, it's not more difficult. You just need to have the taxes paid right away when you close. And that's what we call withholding. So withholding is actually a prepayment of the capital gains taxes. Okay? Are you going to be selling at a gain? Do you have a gain?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and the withholding is 10% of your gross sales price. Okay? But it only means that you're prepaying. Okay? So after the year, when you file the taxes, do you file taxes? Have you been filing taxes?
Before now.
Okay. Well, maybe for this particular one, especially if you feel that the 10% of the sales price will be way too much, more than what you are supposed to pay, then you should get the ITIN. Start getting it right now and file taxes because you might be getting some of it back. Okay.
Can I still change title right now?
You are already in escrow? It's it's not I think it's kind of late. Yeah. But talk to do you have agents involved in the transaction?
Yeah.
Okay, talk to your agent, talk to the CPA. Okay, talk to your accountant and see what they advise you to do. Okay?
Another question. Can I change my escrow in the middle of, after I write document into the escrow, can I still change it?
Well, that's going to also involve the buyer too, right? So the buyer needs to also agree that you change escrow, okay? And sometimes, you really need to decide, is it that important for you to change escrow right now? Because when you change, you need to sign cancellation, and then what if, that kind of give the buyer a chance to, what if you lose the buyer, right? What if you lose, so you need to kind of weigh that a little bit and see if it's really all that necessary, and see if it's going to work for you. But the way to change the escrow is you need both buyer and seller agree. Okay. You're welcome. Yeah. Yes.
For Taiwanese China citizenship, how to get the ITIN number?
Oh, you need to apply. I think there's a W7 form.
It's from the IRS?
Yes. And ask an accountant. The accountants, they can help you with that. Okay. Yes.
If I have a social security number, do I need to apply for the ITIN number? Because I'm not hold a green card right now.
Right. Okay. But you do have a social security number.
Yeah, right.
Do you use that to file taxes already?
Yes.
I think that should be sufficient. I think that is enough. But ask the accountant, as I don't really know, that's not my specialty. I don't really know what the details would be. But it is my understanding that it should be the same number that you can use. Okay, anything else? All right then.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And I wish you good luck. Pass the test very soon. Make lots of money.